The phone call came on a Tuesday morning, 2 weeks before my wedding. I was still in bed, half awake. The kind of groggy where you answer the phone without really thinking about it. A woman's voice, calm, almost too calm. She said, "Is this Jennifer?" I said, "Yeah. Who's this?" She said, "You don't know me, but I think it's time you knew about me. I'm Paul's second ex-wife." I sat up. My heart started pounding. I said, "What?" She said, "Paul, your fiancé. We were married for 3 years. He didn't tell you about me, did he?" I felt cold, like the temperature in the room had dropped. I said, "He told me he'd been married once, to someone named Sarah." She laughed. Not mean, just tired. She said, "Sarah was his first wife. I'm number 2, and you're about to be number 3. I just thought you should know what you're getting into." I hung up. I sat there holding the phone. My hands were shaking. I could hear my heartbeat in my ears. Paul was in the shower. I could hear the water running. I wanted to walk in there and demand answers, but I also wanted to pretend the call never happened. When he came out, he was wrapped in a towel, drying his hair. He looked at me and smiled. He said, "Morning, babe." I said, "Someone just called me." He stopped. He said, "Who?" I said, "A woman. She said she was your second ex-wife." His face changed. Not shocked, just careful. He sat down on the edge of the bed. He didn't look at me. I said, "Is it true?" He was quiet for a long time. Then he nodded. He said, "Yeah, it's true." I felt something break inside me. Not my heart, something else, my sense of reality. I said, "You told me you'd only been married once." He said, "I know." I said, "Why would you lie about that?" He looked up at me. His eyes were wet. He said, "Because I was embarrassed. Because I didn't want you to think I was a failure. Because I thought if you knew I'd been divorced twice, you wouldn't want to marry me." I stared at him. I said, "So you just didn't tell me?" He said, "I was going to tell you, eventually. I just didn't know how." I said, "Who else don't I know about? How many other things have you not told me?" He reached for my hand. I pulled it away. He said, "Nothing, I swear, that's the only thing." But I didn't believe him. Not really. He spent the next 2 weeks trying to fix it. Flowers every day, long texts about how much he loved me, dinner reservations at nice places. He turned up the romance so high it was almost overwhelming. And it worked. Kind of. Because I wanted to believe him. Because the wedding was 2 weeks away. Because I'd already sent out the invitations and bought the dress and told everyone I knew that I was getting married. And because I was 36, and I'd been single for a long time before Paul, and I was tired of being alone. So I told myself it was just one lie, just one thing he didn't tell me. It didn't mean he was a bad person. It just meant he'd made a mistake. I married him. The wedding was beautiful. Everyone said so. I wore my grandmother's veil. Paul cried when he saw me walk down the aisle. We said our vows. We kissed. Everyone clapped. And I pushed that phone call to the back of my mind. For a while, things were good. We moved into a house together. We talked about starting a family. We went on trips. We built a life. But then little things started not adding up, like the time we were filling out a loan application, and the bank said there was a discrepancy in his financial history. He brushed it off, said it was a mistake. But I saw the look on his face. That same careful look. Or the time we were at a restaurant and a woman walked by our table and stared at him. Really stared. And he didn't acknowledge her. Didn't say anything. Just looked down at his plate until she left. I said, "Do you know her?" He said, "No, why?" I said, "She was looking at you like she knew you." He said, "I don't know who that was." But I didn't believe him. I started noticing patterns. The way he'd change the subject when I asked about his past. The way he'd get vague when I asked about old friends or where he used to live. One night, about a year into the marriage, I was cleaning out the garage. I found a box in the back, old photos, documents, things he'd never shown me. I opened it. There were pictures of him with women I didn't recognize, wedding photos, not from his marriage to Sarah, not from his marriage to the woman who called me. Different weddings, different women. I counted 3 3 different brides. I sat on the concrete floor of the garage with those photos spread out around me, and I felt like I couldn't breathe. When Paul came home, I was still sitting there. He saw the photos. He didn't say anything at first. I said, "How many times have you been married?" He said, "Jen, let me explain." I said, "How many?" He said, 4 times, including you. 4 times. I was 37 years old, and I'd married a man who'd been married 4 times, and I didn't know about 3 of them. I said, "Why didn't you tell me?" He said, "Because I knew you'd leave. I knew you wouldn't understand." I said, "Understand what? That you're a liar?" He said, "I'm not a liar. I just didn't tell you everything." I said, "That's the same thing." He got defensive. He said I was overreacting. He said the past was the past. He said what mattered was that he loved me now. But I couldn't hear him anymore, because all I could think was, what else don't I know? Over the next few months, more things came out. I found out he'd had a daughter from his second marriage, a daughter he barely saw, a daughter he'd never mentioned. I found out he'd declared bankruptcy twice, something he'd failed to disclose when we were combining our finances. I found out he'd been fired from a job for embezzlement. Not convicted, but fired. And he'd told me he'd left that job to pursue other opportunities. Every time I confronted him, he had the same response. He'd say he was embarrassed. He'd say he didn't want me to judge him. He'd say he was trying to protect me. But he wasn't protecting me. He was protecting himself. And every lie made the next one easier. By the time we'd been married 2 years, I didn't know what was real anymore. I didn't know if the stories he told me about his childhood were true. I didn't know if his parents were actually dead like he said, or if that was just another thing he made up. I didn't know if the friends he talked about existed. I didn't know if the job he said he had was real, or if he was doing something else during the day. I became obsessed with finding the truth. I'd go through his phone, his emails, his wallet, and every time I found something, it was worse than I thought. Text messages to women I didn't know, credit cards I didn't know about, debts, lies, more lies. One night, I was so exhausted from it all that I just asked him straight. I said, "Is anything you've ever told me true?" He looked at me like I was being cruel. He said, "Of course, I love you. That's true." But I didn't believe that either, because how can you love someone and lie to them about everything? I left him 6 months after that conversation. It wasn't a dramatic exit. I just packed my things while he was at work. I left a note. I said I couldn't do it anymore. He called me. He texted. He showed up at my sister's house where I was staying. He said I was giving up on us. He said every marriage had problems. He said I was being unfair. But I wasn't being unfair. I was being sane. Because you can't build a life with someone who won't tell you the truth. It's been 3 years now. I'm 40. I'm divorced. Again. People ask me if I regret marrying him. And honestly, I don't know. I regret not listening to my gut. I regret ignoring that phone call. I regret convincing myself that one lie wasn't a big deal. Because one lie is never just one lie. It's the tip of something bigger, something darker, and once you start down that road, once you start accepting lies as normal, it's really hard to find your way back to the truth. I think about that morning a lot, the morning that woman called me. I think about how my life would have been different if I'd listened to her, if I'd called off the wedding, if I'd walked away. Would I be happier now? I don't know. Maybe. Maybe not. But I do know this. I wouldn't have spent 3 years of my life wondering what was real. I wouldn't have spent 3 years feeling crazy, feeling like I was the problem, feeling like I was asking too much by wanting honesty. If you're listening to this because someone lied to you about their past, because you found out something big that they never told you, I just want to say one thing. It's not about the past, it's about the lie. Because if someone can lie to you about who they were, they can lie to you about who they are. And you deserve to be with someone who tells you the truth, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it's embarrassing, even when it makes them look bad. You deserve to know who you're building a life with. I didn't get that, and it cost me years of my life. Don't let it cost you yours.